Hello, and welcome to the final class in our series of 4. I've really enjoyed teaching this course, and I hope you also have gained a lot. It's a great privilege to do something you find meaningful for a living and to hopefully help others. So here in the final class, I'd like to talk about cultivating compassion more and the ideal of a bodhisattva, which is a spiritual warrior engaged in their own practice and taking positive actions in the world to liberate themselves and others from suffering. But first of all, let's start with some yoga nidra to relax. So you can lie on the floor and just have a blanket nearby just in case you get cold. Make sure you're on a soft, warm, perhaps the carpet or the rug, so that you're feeling on a firm ground, but you're also comfortable and warm. So you're just lying with your back on the ground and your legs stretched out and your arms stretched out away from the body. So just first, Yoga Nidra is actually from the yoga tradition, the Hindu yoga tradition, and it's basically a way of kind of spiritually power napping. So we're not actually losing consciousness, we're having a moment of going deep to connect with that source of peace. So just lie down, you're in a safe space, let go of the worries of your week, and just become aware of the weight of your body on the floor. Slow your breathing right down. Just love yourself as you are. This body of yours, whether it's old or young, fat or thin, is a miracle. It's a wonderful gift. And your body, be grateful to your body that it does what you need it to do. And just become aware of your right big toe. Take your awareness there. And take your awareness to your other toes. Letting go of any heaviness or tension. And then placing your awareness in the right foot and ankle. Sending good energy there. And then to the right lower leg below the knee, the calf, the shin, all the muscles. Simply placing your awareness there. And then in placing your awareness on the right thigh from the knee to the hip. When life is short, it's such a waste of time to spend your life hating yourself because you don't meet some externally imposed ideals of beauty. Appreciate this body. Take good care of it. Now bringing your awareness over to the left toe, big toe. And to the entire left toes on your foot. And then being aware of the left foot as a whole and the ankle. Releasing any heaviness. Remembering to honor the earth that supports you. To be grounded, to walk with honor and love. And then being aware of the lower leg the shin, the calf, below the knee. Holding it with loving attention. And then the left knee and the left thigh. Just imagining any tension is just dissolving into the earth. The sense of goodness and well-being pervades your body. And then being aware of the pelvis, the buttocks. Holding to your seat with kindness in the face of life's ups and downs. Then the stomach and the lower back, relaxing. You are safe. You don't need to hold things in your gut. Allowing the lower back to just melt into the floor. And being aware of the middle of the back and the upper back, the shoulders. Don't carry the world on your shoulders. Holding it with awareness. And then the right hand. Looking at the ways we touch the world, that we touch others. That our interactions are compassionate and skillful and uplifting. And then the lower right arm. And then the elbow and the upper right arm. Tension just melting away. Holding it with clear, loving attention. And then the left fingers and hand, releasing any tension. Honoring the feminine side of our body. The right side is the masculine, left side is the feminine. Intuition, wisdom beyond intellect. Then the lower right arm, letting go of tension. And then the upper left arm, holding it with loving attention. And then just aware of the neck and the base of the skull, releasing your neck into the floor. Having self-respect. And then your skull, your head, your ears, holding it with loving attention. And then your forehead, your eyebrows, softening. Your right eye, your left eye, your nose, your right cheek, your left cheek, your lips, your jaw, remembering to soften your jaw. And your neck from the top, around your collarbone, coming down to your chest area, your heart, lungs, kind, loving attention. Just filling your whole body, being aware of your whole body with loving attention. All tension softening, dissolving away into the earth. You are in the arms of Mother Earth's embrace. You are loved and cared for. You are good enough. And feeling the weight of your body on the floor, coming back into the room. Reinvigorated. So that is Yoga Nidra, and they say 1 hour of Yoga Nidra is equivalent to 4 hours sleep, but I wouldn't like to test that theory too often. But it certainly can be a wonderful thing to do after a hard day work. Not something to do in the early morning, more something to do in the evening or after you've had a big meal and you can have a siesta. Okay, so the point of Yoga Nidra is to be awake while being restful, to not just fall asleep. Okay, so today I'm talking about the Bodhisattva ideal. So in Mahayana Buddhism, we have this ideal of the compassionate spiritual warrior who sees their interconnectedness with others and therefore is not satisfied merely with their own peace and well-being, but wishes to, because they see that happiness is not just a personal matter, they therefore, as well as holding space for their own practice, they go forth and try to heal the world. And I don't know if you know Greek mythology, but the ideal of the wounded healer is so interesting, because it is often the people who have been through the most suffering and the most challenges who are actually the most compassionate people. We kind of have this idea that if things are good, then we can be a good person. And if life is not the way we want, then we are unable to give of ourselves. Everybody says, well, I'm having a hard time, so I don't care about those people in Africa that I don't know. But that's somebody's mother, that's somebody's child. Why are we just attached to a child who has our own DNA, but we don't care about a neighbour's child or a child just across the border? It just really doesn't make sense when we all have to share the one planet. It's very important that we don't remove others' humanity, that we don't think of them as other, that we think of them as that is another human being like me, irregardless of their race, their gender, their sexual preferences. Otherwise, terrible things happen, man's inhumanity to man. So compassion and kindness are something we need now more than ever. And as a social activist, I sometimes encounter people who think that if you're kind, if you're compassionate, it means that you should do just what they want you to do, that you should be obliging, that you should not bring up uncomfortable issues, that you should not be fierce, that you should not be wrathful or assertive, that you should be pliant, agreeable, kind of like a 1950s housewife. And I'm afraid that's just not what compassion is. Compassion can be according to the circumstances. In Buddhism, we call it upaya, skillful means. So that means that you respond accordingly, appropriately to the situation, and trying to reach people where they're at. And if you can't reach them, just say, all the best, I wish you well, and I plant a seed. It's the idea of compassion is not that one is having a kind of uncomfortable sympathy whereby one views oneself as higher than the person one is helping. A kind of simpering, patronizing, annoying, sugary sweetness. It's really not like that. Compassion is being prepared to get your hands dirty. It's about putting yourself in the shoes and on the level of the person you're trying to help. And it's about empowering them and giving them a voice. It's not about reinforcing your own feeling of lack or your own shame or your own issues and guilt around white privilege or male privilege or cisgender privilege. It's really about humbling yourself. And in a social justice context, it might be about advocating for, using your voice as a person who is more privileged to raise up others who don't have a voice. It's funny how much more people will listen to a white man talk about domestic violence than female survivors of domestic violence. Because if a man talks about domestic violence, he won't have to deal with victim blaming and people asking him, what did you wear? And people, just saying not all men and doing all the, when a white man says domestic violence happens and it's real and it's a problem and it happened to my mother, people will listen. When Patrick Stewart says domestic violence happens, people listen. But if a survivor talks, there's so many issues, like not all men. So compassion can be fierce. Compassion responds to the situation. And compassion is also about understanding, about really being able to put yourself in another person's situation. And not just saying what you think they need, but asking them and helping them come to their own wise conclusions. The best counselor is not a person who offers advice. The best counselor is a person who holds safe space and is a clear mirror for someone else's issues so that they can clearly see what is the problem. And a counselor will not offer advice, or as little as possible, but will rather help that person come to their own conclusion, to connect with their own wisdom. Because only a person themselves know what is best for them. If someone suggests it from the outside and they're not ready to hear it, they may not take that advice, or they may misapply it because they didn't understand. Sometimes when Buddhist monks and nuns say, save all beings, don't be selfish, don't be self-obsessed, people who have low self-esteem use that as a stick to beat themselves up with. Like, I'm not good enough, I'm not spiritual enough, I don't love others enough. And then they go, to the soup kitchen or to the spiritual center, and they're kind of demeaning themselves and exhausting themselves because they're using that idea of compassion to beat themselves up and not love themselves. And some people who are a bit narcissistic may, if they hear love yourself, they may go, oh yes, love myself, and they'll make it all about them, and they'll make their spiritual practice all about them and their experiences. And that's also a misuse. So when we say compassion, we mean not making the ego too big, but we also mean caring for yourself, nourishing yourself, healing yourself, doing your own spiritual practice, filling yourself up, but also reaching a certain point where you realize, I really can't just make this words anymore. I really have to go out and turn it into action, because the seed is known by its fruit. So your studies, your spiritual practices are only as good as the actions they produce. And you don't have to wait until the world is perfect. It's like the people who think they have to be skinny to teach yoga. For me, as a woman who is larger size, I'd love to see a woman my own size teaching yoga. Yoga is for everyone. Meditation is for everyone. You don't finally have to have it all together to be worthy of starting something amazing. Often the most amazing social movements were started by accidental activists. Someone, for example, like Malala Yousafzai, shot in the head by the Taliban, then becomes the poster child for education for girls, And the people who we revere who are saints, they didn't have an easy life. Mother Teresa, the Dalai Lama, Nelson Mandela. These are not people who, have Botox and are in vogue. These are people whose faces are crumpled like a paper bag, and they've looked like they've had a hard life. They've lost their country, or they've lived with lepers, or they were in jail for 27 years and suffered human rights abuses, or were terribly violent before they committed to non-violence. So these are people who saw the worst in humanity, but somehow managed to retain their humanity and then advocate for good. And these people stood up for the oppressed, but also did not demonize the oppressor. Like Nelson Mandela did the Peace and Reconciliation conferences in South Africa, and people talked about the terrible things that had happened, but it was done with as little violence as possible. It was such an amazing transformation. So anyway, I've spoken about that in a vague way enough. In terms of actual compassion, how we develop it, there are two ways. One way is by using our mother or someone like a mother, and then recognizing their kindness, all the little things they've done for you. So some of us have a difficult relationship with our parents, but if you think carefully, unless you are seriously abused, in which case you should definitely choose someone else. Perhaps your parents didn't have the best skills. Maybe they grew up post-war. In those days, the idea of good parenting was to give a child food and shelter. And it's like, well, we gave you food and shelter. What more do you want? So they were doing the best they could to survive at the time. And if you think about all the things they did for you that were so amazing, like they cooked a meal for you every day, they washed your clothes, they sent you to a good school, they worried about you, they stayed up late worrying about where you were at night. Even when you're grown up, they still worry about you. They would gladly give their life for you. If you have someone like that in your life, think about their kindness in great detail. And then a sense of gratitude arises. And then along with the sense of gratitude, you could think, well, it's not just enough that I've taken their kindness, I need to repay it. How can I repay it? And then you think, well, I could send them on a cruise around the world, but then they'd come back and they'd still, have fear and insecurity and depression. So even if they're a happy person, they still get sick now and then. So what I need to do is provide a lasting peace for them. And I can only do that if I have peace myself. That doesn't mean that you try and convert them or anything. It just means that it's the story of teach a man to fish instead of giving a man a fish for a day. So you realize that in order to help the world, you also need some spiritual wisdom. And that's where you understand that that the best way to repay someone's kindness is to attain awakening and to develop wisdom, along with helping people in practical ways. Giving food and shelter to the homeless and protecting the vulnerable and giving asylum to genuine refugees. Protecting children from sexual abuse, women and men who are victims of domestic violence. There's so many issues. And protecting the earth, protecting the sacred. And so this process, one recognizes the kindness of a benefactor, one sees the need to repay it, one realizes that the best way to do that is through not just material means, but through attaining liberation from delusion. And then one's whole shift about the purpose of one's life changes, and one sees that the purpose of life is to awaken, to end delusion, and to pursue the path of liberation, not just for oneself alone, but for all beings. And when you have that attitude, your whole attitude to the spiritual teachings also change, because you see this is not just a stress relief product, this is a life-transforming, holistic path that transforms everything I do. And a way of being with kindness for the issues that arise with yourself. Like sometimes when jealousy or resentment or feeling depressed comes, we judge ourselves. We're not charitable or compassionate to these prisoners of the heart that come. So it's compassion for yourself and compassion for others. Setting boundaries is not a bad thing. Don't be a compassionate idiot. A compassionate idiot is a person who gives money to an alcoholic, a person who, stays with someone who's abusing them, who enables people's dysfunction, who doesn't have good boundaries, and who ends up exhausted and resentful when they try to be compassionate because they're not wise. Wisdom and compassion are like two wings of the bird that carry you to your goal. So this is the process whereby we exchange this self-obsessed, narrow mind for a more broad, compassionate, altruistic mind. And remember, when we say compassion, that includes you too. And once we've developed this mind of bodhicitta, the wish to free all beings from suffering, this mind of Buddha nature, we then practice the 6 perfections of a bodhisattva, a compassionate spiritual warrior so the first step is generosity. So I mentioned material giving, giving freedom from fear, protecting human rights, protecting people who are escaping situations of violence and danger, giving them sanctuary, protecting the vulnerable, being generous, and holding space for people who have problems, learning to listen in order to heal. And then the gift of Dharma, the gift of truth, the gift of peace. If you think about the gift of peace and love that someone can give you, sometimes that is the most profound gift you can give another human being, to just make them feel heard and to show by your life that love is possible, that hope is possible, that tyrants fall, that these terrible things don't last forever, and that human beings can create a better world. So generosity. And then the next one is ethical conduct, doing no harm. So that means avoiding the 10 negative actions and practicing the the opposite of that. So avoiding killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and cherishing life, being generous, and protecting people from sexual abuse. Avoiding the 4 negativities of speech, which we spoke about last time, practicing the opposite of that. So no harsh speech, lying, slander, or meaningless speech. Practicing meaningful speech, uplifting others, speaking wise truth, and so forth. And then the 3 of mind to avoid are greed, hatred, and delusion. So we see a lot of greed in the world. You know, we see a lot of people who put profit before people. I mean, we all watch the news and we feel terrible when we hear that the factory has collapsed on the Bangladeshi teenage girls making our clothes. But we don't see the connection between our summer sale item that we wouldn't wait, that we definitely felt we needed and we definitely wanted on sale. But the thing is, if it's cheap, who is paying the price for that? Where is your clothing coming from? What is it polluting? Who paid the price for that? Who paid hours of their life to make it? So if you consume something, try to look for an ethical fair trade product that is organic, like bamboo cotton, you know, hemp, reuse, recycle, repurpose, fix. And people say, well, the economy just won't go like that. Well, the economy won't go when we have no more resources and no planet left to support us either, you know. So there, you know, perhaps we have to shift to a more kind, sustainable economy based on real resources rather than money bubbles, and with a more equitable redistribution of resources. Because while people are homeless and insecure, it affects the security and well-being of everyone in the society. I mean, there are people in Colombia who have to employ security guards to take their children to school, and, you know, they give their children bulletproof clothes because the wealthy people are so afraid that the poor people who are so desperate will attack their children, you know, or kidnap them. So that is what is, you know, the fear that those people who are hoarding resources have about the people who perhaps they're profiting from their exploitation. There's always a hidden price there, you know. Yeah, and thinking about how we isolate people, you know, why don't we put the elderly and the children together to make a vibrant community rather than isolating elderly people as if they've got leprosy or something. Old age is not a contagious disease. Those people are human beings and they need to participate in society and feel loved and appreciated and wanted, you know, and they're really no different from us. They just have a few more lines of experience. Okay, so we've talked about, we're talking about ethical conduct and practicing. So we can see the problem of greed in the world. So many of the world's, in the last 20 years, there's been a huge shift of money from the bottom level of society upwards and from the middle class. And we see the Western economies shrinking. So I think we're all going to have to learn to live with less and invest more in people than in things. Because at the end of the day, if you've got a huge house full of stuff, it's not really going to keep you warm at night, is it? There was an amazing story recently of a 30-year-old Muslim man in Sydney who was told that he had stage 4 cancer and that he had 7 months to live. And this was a man who had 2 Porsches, who had Rolex watches and Louis Vuitton 100 pairs of shoes. He was a very successful entrepreneur. And he was speaking to his mullah, and he actually started a charity in Africa and gave hundreds of thousands of dollars for sustainable projects to empower the poor. And he said, you know, here at the, on the tail end of my life, I realized, like a lot of people look at me driving my Porsche and think that I've realized I've reached the pinnacle of success. But actually, you've wasted your life if you think that driving a fast car is the point of life, you know. Actually, this car is worth $600,000, but giving a child in Africa a pair of shoes and a chance at life through sponsoring them for school, it's so much more wealth and beauty and abundance and meaning and joy than it ever gave me to drive a Ferrari or a Porsche. And this man lived 3 years after being told he'd live 7 months. and just gave away all his possessions, just left his family nice and secure, but gave away most of his money and made peace, and devoted himself to spirituality and generosity. And to me, it's just such an inspiring story. I just thought, does it take cancer for us to realize that, for 80 people having as much money as half the world is crazy, and it's not the way to be happy? That loving each other and sharing is the way to be happy. So that is the 10, greed, ignorance, and aversion are the states of mind on the 10 non-virtues that we want to transform. So instead of ignorance, we cultivate wisdom, we see interconnectedness. We see that when we profit from another person's exploitation, it can't create long-term happiness for us. And, indifference, like a lot of people say, I don't want to know about the negativity. But it's also kind of cutting off a bit of your heart, So stay abreast of what's going on and do what you can, but don't let it in so much that it completely hijacks your life, because you also need to maintain peace to be a peace activist in the world. Okay, so generosity, ethical conduct, and then patience. Patience is not something I'm not very good at as an activist who wants to see change. But patience is important, and knowing that enlightenment, that spiritual practice, that relationships, everything good in life requires effort and requires time and requires patience, and there is a season for everything. But there are certain things that we certainly should push for, and that we should build a critical mass for, that certain things that shouldn't be tolerated. But we can't always change everything, but what we can do is protect our mind. So there's a saying that it's clearly impossible to upholster the whole surface of the earth in order to avoid stepping on thorns, but the smart person simply covers the sole of their foot in leather to avoid stepping on thorns. So we can't cover the whole surface of the earth in leather, but we can cover our own foot. We can protect our own mind. So it is a variable, uncertain world, but we can protect our own mind with mindfulness, with peace, with kindness, and with accepting impermanence, accepting that things change, that there is loss, there is uncertainty, but to take refuge in that inner peace and to just rest. Sometimes life pulls the rug out from under us and we struggle very quickly to get it all together, to organize everything. I don't think we're really ever going to get it together, because life is changeable, life is change. So rest, just allow a bit of space, allow that uncertainty, allow that dynamic, changing, vibrant energy. That is life. And a person who doesn't have any challenges, who is not juggling, is a corpse, So as long as you're growing, you're facing challenges, and that's okay. It's okay to have a challenging time sometimes, to grow. And okay, so then we've gone through patience. So patience when spiritual practice gets difficult, patience with challenging people, patience to persevere in the face of difficult odds for the greater good. And then we have joyous effort. I think I've missed one.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have generosity, we have ethical conduct, we have joyous effort, we have patience, we have concentration.
So, and then is that the final one?
And wisdom.
Okay. Cool.
Do you want me to say it again?
Just come off the back. These come off the back of patience.
Okay. Okay, so after patience we have joyous effort, then we have concentration and wisdom. So joyous effort is, the effort I spoke about to persist when things are difficult, and to my glass is half full, to find gratitude, to find good things in challenging circumstances. Because if we really see, a diamond is a beautiful rock that just was under a lot of pressure. So sometimes the most amazing awakenings happen when life is pressing us, when life is challenging us. And to not look at things falling apart, to not look at heartbreak or difficult circumstances as a problem, but just to be open, to allow it to arise, abide, and dissolve like everything else. To not resist, to not run away, to not suppress, but to just allow it to wash over you, to learn from it, to grow, and to move on if you can, as much as you can. But to not see it as a problem, to not be constantly seeking an escape, some kind of, to see the dark side, the difficult things as a problem. It's part of growth. For every light there is a shadow. And that's a balance, that's as it should be. And you can face those things with a peace, and even while those challenges are going on, there is a certain level of peace in yourself that this too shall pass. So joyous effort is the courage to come back again and again to the meditation cushion, to show up for life, to return to the present moment, and to try to be a good person, even if you feel no one else in the world is being a good person. If you can't find lovable people, be that lovable person. We're always looking for the one, that love, that will make everything okay. And we seek to receive love. We want to be loved, but we don't seek to love. There's a saying in India, the hand of the giver is never empty. So in order to receive, you first have to give, you first have to be open. So don't just seek to be loved, but to understand, to give. Otherwise we turn love into a kind of commodity, and we throw away the people we love when we find something better, But seek to love in a way that does no harm, that understands and cherishes and respects another person, that makes you a safe person for people to put their trust in, that you honor, love, and respect someone. And that you're there in the hard times, not just the good times. It's very easy to be there in the good times, but it's not so easy to be there when you're going through something yourself, And with ourselves as well, we want to zone in for the good times when meditation is blissful, but we don't want to be there in the difficult, challenging times. But it's the difficult, challenging times that we should lean in and get curious and grow, because no mud, no lotus. This beautiful flower grows out of the mud. And likewise, out of suffering, out of brokenness, out of difficulty comes great insight, great compassion. So that is joyous effort. And then concentration is, like we've talked about in the Noble Eightfold Path, the awareness that frees, that we constantly return to the present moment, that we don't concretize, that we're open to new information, new habits, new patterns, that we're curious about life, that we have a fresh beginner's mind, that we're not prejudiced and carrying our overthinking into every future moment, that we're not carrying the lady on our back when we left her at the river. And then finally is wisdom, which is a bit similar to wisdom in the Noble Eightfold Path. Understanding emptiness, understanding interconnectedness, understanding your well-being and my well-being are tied together in a sacred bond with a similar destiny. So that is the 6 perfections and the ideal of the Bodhisattva. And the Dalai Lama says, even if you're a selfish person, develop compassion, because it gives great well-being, it gives resilience, it gives purpose in life, and it gives happiness, lasting happiness, even in the midst of tremendous challenges. I was always amazed by the resilience of the Tibetan people I saw. Even though they had lost their country, they were just busy helping each other. They weren't feeling sorry for themselves, that they weren't completely destroyed by that was tremendously inspiring to me. So I think compassion is what the world needs right now. But remember, it's as much for yourself attending to your own mud as it is for others. So thank you so much for being a part of this Udemy platform course, and I hope you gain something out of it. You can see our project for a monastery in Australia. You can see our charity for people from the ex-untouchable community who were previously enslaved. You can see that charity information on YouTube under Bodhicitta Foundation. You can see our monastery on Bodhicitta Dakini Monastery. You can see I'm quite active on Facebook under Ayya Yeshe. So thank you so much. And I also have sacred chants on YouTube under India, Jiva and Ayya Yeshe. So thank you so much for contributing and investing in our work, and I hope you gained a great deal of peace and joy from this course. It's been a pleasure. All the best.